All right. Hello, everyone. We'll just wait as people enter the room. Give them a few more minutes. I have about 15 people registered. I know not everybody who registered ends up coming, but we'll just give it maybe like 2 more minutes before we get started. And I see that more people are coming in. Hello, everyone. We're just giving everybody a chance to get into the webinar room before we get started. To see if anybody else is joining. So Rachel, we're just going to maybe wait 1 more minute before we get started. And Fatima, I'm going to ask you to maybe hit the record button already. All right, and I guess we will get started. Fatima, could you start recording, please? Okay, thank you so much. All right, everyone. Thank you so much and welcome to our webinar for our next round of pilot research applications for our network or our networks. So as you know, the NIH has funded several music for pain research networks, which I'll talk about in a moment. So today we'll talk about the purpose of this pilot research program, our high priority research areas, eligibility criteria, then of course the different proposal sections. But I especially want to bring your attention to some major pitfalls, some things that we saw in the initial round of applications we had received. We will also talk about evaluation criteria, the review and the selection process, and then we'll go to Q&A. So for Q&A, I ask that you please don't put your questions in the chat, but instead put your questions in the Q&A area. That way we can keep track of what questions have been answered. So that would be really great. So, and I will also ask maybe Fatima, if you can keep an eye on people who are being in the lobby and asking to join. I see somebody just asked. There we go. All right. So the NIH, NCCIH, and the National Endowment for the Arts are currently funding 3 different music research networks. I lead the Music for Pain network. Dr. Jeffrey Dusek leads the Ensemble network, and Dr. Deborah Burns leads the Audio Analgesia network. And I highly recommend that you go to each of our websites to see what we are about, because in your your application, you will have to indicate which of these three networks you would like your application to go to. So it's important that you read up on us a bit and what we have been doing. We won't have time to go into that into detail today, but we all have websites. So please head on over there after this and check us out. So the purpose of the RFA is to support pilot studies that will generate preliminary data to strengthen a future NIH application aimed at better understanding underlying mechanisms of music for pain management. And the words that are underlined here are really important. So as you think about a pilot study that you would like to propose to us, really think about this, that the data that you gather from this pilot study should help you successfully compete for a future NIH application. And you're actually specifically asked in the application to comment on that. Like what are your future plans for this data? Second, that future grant would need to be aimed at better understanding underlying mechanisms. Therefore, we only accept proposals for mechanistic research. So please do not submit to us a proposal for an efficacy study. So no proposals for studies that are looking to investigate if music-based intervention or if music or music therapy helps for pain management, but rather we want you to identify a potential underlying mechanism that you want to test with your pilot data. So that is really important. So then some of you may ask, what is mechanistic research? So a mechanistic trial, the NIH definition is that it's designed to understand the biological or behavioral process or the mechanisms of action of an intervention. So for our purpose, we define it as a research that examines a mechanism of action that helps explain, again, how music impacts pain. And mechanisms can be tested or explored in several ways. So for example, you may want to propose a study that uses an experimental design that very carefully selects control conditions so that you can isolate the target mechanism. So let's say you want to isolate pleasure as a mechanism, then you would carefully select control conditions that help you manipulate that target mechanism and helps you, isolate that particular mechanism. Or another example we listed here would be sensory motor synchronization, if that were a mechanism that you think plays an important role. So that's one way to do it. Another way in clinical studies, you often see mediation studies or mediation analyses being used. And that's because in clinical studies, it's often much harder to experimentally manipulate a target mechanism. Animal model can be another way to test a mechanism. And also secondary analyses of existing data sets can be used to be hypothesis generating in terms of identifying potential mechanisms. So this is not a list of a comprehensive list, but just some examples to help you understand how you might want to investigate a potential mechanism. The measurement of the target mechanism can include brain imaging, but it can also include non-neural physiological measures such as heart rate variability or maybe a plasma or salivary marker. It can also include self-report measures. So it's important to understand that mechanistic research does not need to or is not only research that uses brain imaging, for example. In terms of research priorities, we have several listed in our call. No need for you to write these all down here. They are all included in our requests for applications that are posted on our websites, but I'll quickly review them here. So a first research priority is the exploration of innovative mechanistic hypotheses of the neural systems involved. So that could be sensory, motor, cognitive, emotional, affective, and so on. A second priority area is the examination of non-neural physiological systems and novel measures. For example, the impact on related non-neural organs or biochemical or molecular signals, maybe epigenetic modifications, again, as relevant to advancing mechanistic understanding of music or music-based interventions for chronic or acute pain. Another one is investigation of psychological, behavioral, social predictors, moderators, or mediators of the effects of MBIs on acute or chronic pain. And also the discovery of predictive biomarkers, or what's also often called signatures or profiles for music-based interventions. So to better understand who responds best to music-based interventions for pain management. Number 5 is the development or testing of innovative animal models to study mechanisms and biomarkers of music or MBIs, always again in the context of acute or chronic pain. Number 6 is the development or testing of novel technologies to measure how music or MBIs impact the brain or body, or to monitor health-related responses relevant to acute or chronic pain. And then number 7 is the development of large de-identified data sets of music-based interventions deployed in medical centers to address mechanistic understanding of MBI's influence on acute or chronic pain. And when you go to our respective websites, you will see several of these priority areas reflected in the kind of work that each of the networks are doing. So then what types of mechanistic pilot studies are feasible? It is very important to keep in mind, again, that the goal is to generate pilot data for subsequent R-level grant submissions. So we don't expect you to run a fully powered study, of course, because the budget is only $50,000. So there's only so much you can do. So it's really about generating pilot data that can help you set up for success for a subsequent NIH application. Keep in mind, again, you have a small budget, but also a small time period, so only 1 year. So make sure that whatever you propose is really feasible. We are scoring you on that. So if you propose something that we know is just absolutely not possible in a 1-year time frame, your application is not going to score well. We're also looking for innovative ideas. So please avoid incremental research or avoid doing research for which we already know the answers, right? We want something innovative, because if you don't propose something innovative, it's never going to lead to NIH funding success. You might want to propose proof of concept studies, or again, secondary data analysis to look for a signal or generate a hypothesis. You might want to propose a single arm study to look for a signal, rather than proposing that you're going to run, for example, a randomized controlled trial. Although you might already have a good idea of the signal that you think you'll find, because maybe you did already some testing, or maybe your clinical research gives you a lot of confidence that there would be a signal for a particular target mechanism. In that case, you may be more interested in using this pilot funding to test the actual study design. So maybe you want to test the type of control group or control condition or multiple conditions that you want to put in place. Maybe you want to test an experimental paradigm because, for example, if you work with experimentally induced pain and you want people to be exposed to different types of music stimuli or different types of control stimuli, it's really important that you test that carefully before you, of course, you propose to do a fully powered study in a future grant application. So again, please do not propose that you'll be running a full-fledged powered clinical trial, because we all know that that, of course, wouldn't be possible in that time frame or with that funding. In terms of eligibility, as outlined in our request for applications, only research scholars affiliated with an accredited university or affiliated with a medical center in the United States are eligible to apply. So consultants of other countries are allowed, but no money can leave the United States. Yeah. So let's say you want to collaborate with somebody in the UK or somebody in Australia, you can do that, but they need to be consultants on your grant rather than through co-investigators, as is typically understood in the NIH world, meaning where their effort would be charged to the grant. So no money can leave the United States. We certainly encourage early stage investigators and postdoctoral scholars with mentor support to apply. But pilot applications must include a multidisciplinary team. So then we ask you to compose that team really wisely, meaning you may want to carefully think about which other knowledge areas need to be represented in your team, but also maybe it's a good idea to have one person with some more NIH or federally funded kind of research experience, so that that person can also help you write a good, compelling pilot application and then move forward with you for a future NIH application. Applicants or the PI must be a member of at least one of the networks by the time of submission, but it's really easy to join. Joining our networks is free. So again, head on over to our websites where you can easily sign up and it's, free. So we want to give you an example of what we mean by a multidisciplinary team. So the team could be made up of maybe a neuroscientist, a music therapist, and maybe a pain rehabilitation specialist, or maybe a musician, a neuroscientist, and a psychologist, or a healthcare clinician with a music therapist or a music practitioner and a pain rehabilitation specialist. So carefully think about what expertise you need on your team. So for example, submitting an application where you only have maybe, let's say, a pain rehabilitation specialist and a medical doctor are proposing an application, but there's no expertise whatsoever related to music or music-related research, that probably would not be a strong or considered a strong team. Or vice versa, if it were a musician with a music therapist and let's say a psychologist who has no experience in pain research, that would also not be a strong team. So carefully think about the composition of your team. And in terms of the different types of members or the different levels of leadership in your team, you would, of course, would have a principal investigator who leads the project. And then you might have one or two co-investigators, and those are people who significantly contribute to your project. And then you might have one or more consultants who would offer guidance or advice. We realize with a small pilot budget, you don't have a lot of budget to create a very large team. So it might be that people's percentage efforts on the grants need to be quite low in order for you to afford having several people. But we're also not looking for you to have, a team of 5 or 6 or 7 people for this pilot project. Some additional considerations is that primary data collection projects are appropriate, meaning studies where you would collect data from human subjects, research participants, or animals. Those are certainly appropriate, but you have to consider that these projects must be completed within the proposed 1-year timeline, and that might get challenging. And so therefore, it might be more feasible to leverage an ongoing study by adding a study design element or a measure, or using a similar approach to an ongoing study. That might be more feasible for you, and therefore we strongly encourage you uh, to think about that. Again, secondary data analyses are are acceptable, and might even be recommended because they're going to be more feasible to accomplish. However, please make sure when you propose a secondary data analysis project that you represent a novel scientific, or that your research represents a novel scientific advancement. Proposals cannot include high-risk populations, and in our RFA, we put a link to NIH site that lists high-risk populations. And no data collection for human subjects or animal research in foreign countries are permitted. So you're allowed to have a foreign consultant, but none of the research data collection that you do can happen in a foreign country. And then in terms of the money, we ask you to submit 1-year modular budgets in increments of $25,000 and not to exceed $50,000. If your budget would need to exceed $50,000, please contact us first to make sure we can give you approval for that. That will only be permitted in exceptional circumstances. And if you don't know what incremental or modular budgets are, please consult with your grants management at your institution. They will be very familiar with it. We ask, of course, for you to submit a budget justification. Expenses might include things like salary or fringe benefits for the PI or co-investigators and research staff. You may include expenses for research supplies and for participant payments. Project-related travel expenses are allowed, but they must occur during the 1-year pilot period. So if you want to include, let's say, conference travel to go present the results, it's very unlikely that that would all happen in 1 year, right? That you would be able to run the study, analyze, and have your data ready to submit to a conference. So maybe you need to travel to a certain site, or you need to bring a co-investigator to the site for a particular reason. Those are kind of travel expenses that might be more reasonable given the 1-year time limit. Please note, and this is really important, that institutional indirect costs are not allowed, and publication costs are not allowed. In the last round, we saw that in the pilot applications, people most of the time abided by that, so did not include institutional indirect costs in their application. But for those who were then awarded or selected for award, when then they had to submit a bunch of paperwork to us, then their research offices were confused and said, well, but of course, institutional indirect costs are allowed because these are U24 networks and they allow IDC indirect costs. So know that even though our overarching U24 funding mechanisms allowed for indirect costs to us, to the 3 institutions who received the NIH grant to start these networks, there's no indirect cost for these pilot projects, okay? Your grants administrator will know what this means as well, but they're required to use the R&R forms when you create a budget, and budgets will need to be approved by NIH if selected for funding. And I can certainly answer any questions you have about budget when we get to the Q&A section of today's presentation. So we require a letter of intent. We did not require that the very first time we put out a call, but because we received several applications for efficacy studies, even though in the RFA it explicitly states that efficacy studies are not allowed, we want to make sure we put a little safe guard in place right now. And so we ask people to submit a letter of intent that will give us an abstract of the project, maximum 30 lines. But at least that abstract should include your study aims so that we can take a quick look, make sure that your application falls within the limitations of this pilot funding call for applications. So the LOI should include the principal investigator's name and affiliation, as well as that for any co-investigators and consultants you might have, the title of your project, the abstract, and your target research area. And you will submit that to Arlene, who's on this call. And again, her email address and the specific instructions are posted on our websites in the RFA details. So you can just go there to read all the details. The proposal itself will have a cover page, and then will need to include a 6-page maximum proposal, which includes the following sections: the specific aims, which is in 1 page, a specific aims document, a significance and innovation section, an approach section, or what is also often called a research plan, the environment you need to describe. Sorry for my dog. You need to describe your environment. That means your institutional environment and the resources that they bring to your project, your potential for future NIH funding, and then also, of course, any literature that you cite, and your reference list is not included in the page limit. And then we also ask for up to 2 one-page letters of support. Not included in the page limit. Okay, so submit 2 letters of support, but they can only be 1 page maximum. Then in addition, you need to submit NIH BioSketch for all team members. For those of you who are not familiar with NIH writing, that's kind of a CV, but it looks quite different. So it has very specific formatting requirements and content area requirements. So please make sure to check on our RFA. We have listed a link to help you get familiar with these NIH specific kind of things that you're asked to submit, as well as NIH specific grant writing. And then you would also submit your budget and your budget justification. So if you are new to NIH proposal writing, please, please, please consult the NIH guidelines for writing grant applications. We have this link in our RFA. Do not submit a pilot application without consulting this. And most importantly, I highly recommend that you collaborate with a team member who has experience in writing NIH applications, because it's very different kind of writing than maybe something you did in your graduate training. For example, a master thesis proposal would look very different than an NIH proposal. All right, almost there. I want to bring to you some major pitfalls or some things that we noted in prior rounds of applications. One is, again, please do not submit applications for efficacy of effectiveness trials. We did receive several of those, and again, they are not eligible for this funding call. Avoid including a large number of outcomes. So we had some applications that said we're going to measure pain and depression and anxiety and stress and all of these things, but no clear mechanistic outcome or mechanistic framework was identified. So it cannot be kind of a fishing expedition, and you cannot count on us to try to figure out for you what your mechanism of interest might be. So you need to clearly identify what that primary variable of interest is. Other things we noticed were overly ambitious or unfocused kind of applications, and also applications that miss essential details. So make sure to include a description of and a rationale for the music stimulus. If it's an experimental, a lab study where you might have people listen to a music stimulus or a music intervention. So don't just name, say, participants will listen to music or participants will receive music therapy, we need to know more in detail what that means. The same for the control conditions. Please include a description and a rationale for your control conditions, if you include a control condition. We saw several applications with severely underdeveloped method sections, and here is again where I highly recommend that you work with somebody who has written NIH applications before. And we also saw some applications that did not fare well because they either completely lacked a statistical analysis section or the analysis section was overly simplistic, maybe just 1 or 2 sentences. So work with a statistician as well as you develop this. Some applications lacked multidisciplinary teams, which even though we explicitly state that we require multidisciplinary teams. So please make sure you abide by that, because otherwise your application, even if it's a strong application, will not get funded. And then we definitely noticed some applications where there was a clear lack of experience with NIH level grant writing. And that's why we now really emphasize, go look at those resources and work with somebody who has that level of a grant writing experience. And then on to the evaluation. This is also listed on our websites, but there are 4 kind of areas that we will evaluate, and that's per the NIH simplified review criteria. One is importance of the research, which means that we want to look or evaluate whether your study addresses an important mechanistic question. And also, does your proposal include novel concept, novel approaches? Is it innovative? The second area is rigor and feasibility, and that really has to do with us evaluating whether your overall method, study design, statistical analyses, your planned activities are appropriate and rigorous, and are they also feasible to be completed within that 1-year time frame. We will also be looking at your team. Do the principal investigators and co-investigators have the background necessary to successfully complete a project? Again, is it a multidisciplinary team? Will the environment in which the project will be completed, will that contribute to the probability of success? So basically, are they providing you with the resources that you need? Or will the project benefit from maybe unique features of your environment, so of your institution, or maybe participant population or collaborative arrangements that you might have? The expertise and resources do not get scored. The other criteria get scored, but they do play into our overall impact score, so the overall score that you will be getting. And then we will also be looking again at the future potential of your project. Is it likely to lead to future NIH funding success? And have you articulated future plans stemming from the project that you are proposing? So all applications will be reviewed by 3 music network team members and or external reviewers. So we make sure that there's the necessary expertise on each review or each team that reviews a particular pilot application. The selection, though, of the pilot projects that will end up being funded is in consultation with the NIH project scientists and approved by the NIH program officers. So it's not a decision that is solo made by the research networks. And then important to know is that if you are selected for funding, you will be requested to submit additional materials for further consideration and to conform to NIH funding requirements. And then finally, a final report will need to be submitted at the conclusion of the project. And I just want to come back to the third area here about requiring to submit additional materials. Some of you may have noted that we have not posted yet on our website the names and the titles of the pilot applications of the first round. And that unfortunately has to do with what happened in our country and all the challenges around research funding and also elimination of staff, which has significantly slowed down the review and the decision process at the NIH. I'm happy to say that we're about ready to announce the names, but then of course the government shutdown is now again causing another little obstacle here. So we hope that very, very soon the applicants will be able to be named on our website. And here are the key dates. The first column is passed, but we are now in the second column. So LOIs are due November 1st. And after we receive the LOI, we will then invite you or not to submit a full application. The LOI review is also an opportunity for us to say, this looks like an interesting application, but please be mindful and maybe we notice a gap. Or maybe we can tell you, sorry, this is an efficacy study, would not be eligible. If you are still interested in applying, please next time around, submit an LOI that truly will address a mechanistic research question. Yeah. And so you can see that there's future application cycles. This also means that if you don't get funded this time around, or you didn't get funded the prior time, that you are able to resubmit once you receive your reviewer comments. Of course, people who submitted by the September 1st deadline, we are not quite done yet with review, so you wouldn't be able to receive your review comments for the December 1st deadline. At least I don't think so. So probably more likely that you would be able to resubmit in the February-March cycle. And here are the 3 Music Research Network contacts. Please know that they are on our website. So if you go to one of our websites, look at the RFA, you will be able to see all these contacts there. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing so I can more easily see any Q&As that people may have posted. I don't see anything yet, so please feel free to drop your questions in the chat if you have any. Give people a little bit of time to put their questions in there. I am sure that some of you might have questions. This is an ideal opportunity to get any specific questions that you have answered. Okay, Jonathan is asking, are stage 0 research studies eligible for the pilot grant? So yes, we really accept any initial exploratory studies as long as they bring an innovative mechanistic research question. Okay, you do not need to have any prior data. This really can be the very beginning of your exploration, but it does need to include an innovative mechanistic question. Any other questions? Is more than one PI allowed? Yes, you can do a multiple PI situation. Just make sure, again, both PIs are in the United States, affiliated with a university or a medical center. However, please carefully consider why you would need that. So when you do for NIH grant writing a multiple PI situation, you typically want to give a good rationale as to why there need to be two PIs rather than a PI and a co-investigator. And in some scenarios, it's because the two really bring very different types of knowledge that are absolutely, and it's absolutely essential that they are both able to lead that part of the research project. I'm just thinking because we might consider as you move forward for NIH funding, you would need to be able to provide a solid rationale for a multiple PI situation. Yeah, but absolutely we allow that. Any other questions? And please also know that you don't have to wait till the deadline to submit your letter of intent. You can submit it as soon as it's ready, and then we can review as they come in, and especially if feedback would need to be given to you to maybe refine or consider something, that might give you some extra time then to think about those as you write your full application. And as we wait for any additional questions to come in, I also want to bring your attention to an opportunity that the research networks are offering. And that is, let's say you decide you're not going to go for this pilot funding because maybe you already have some convincing pilot data, or maybe for another project that you're thinking about, you want to apply for NIH funding for a mechanistic study related to music for pain. We offer consulting sessions for people who are interested to submit something directly to NIH. You can go to our websites to find more information about that. But each time, about 2 months before the due dates for the NIH submission cycle, we offer consulting sessions, and you basically are asked to submit an Ames page to us, and then you can get a 30-minute consulting session with core members of one of our research networks who have a lot of experience with NIH writing. And so we hope that that might be helpful to give you a first look at your study aims and to give you maybe some input that might be helpful as you prepare your application. And I see that Fatima actually put the link in our chat if you would be interested in reading more about that. Any more questions? Or that, Dr. Burns, I see that you're on the call. I don't know if you want to add anything before we close this up.
No, I think you've covered it very well. Thank you for doing that.
All right. If there are no further questions, then we are going to bid you farewell, and we hope to see some really interesting letter of intent submitted to us. Good luck with your application, and I wish you a wonderful afternoon and evening, depending on where you are.